gosh. And there's just like so much emotion attached to it. And it's funny.
It is
You're
funny.
really
It
good
is
at
funny. You
doing
know,
that.
and the
Just,
thing is, like, I'm very careful and very specific about the words I use. And
yeah.
when I put those posts out, I'm practicing my copywriting and my headline writing skills as well at the
Mm,
same time. And every single word, especially those ones that limit how many characters you can use,
yeah.
every single word is there with a specific intention because I'm trying to minimize the amount of words I can use because with copywriting and headline writing, we understand that sometimes the more bold statements or the more vague statements that people can interpret however they wish. So
Mm,
it's kind of a fun game to challenge myself to see how I can make this message more attention getting or bold or provocative or create a question with fewer words. When people write too much, they kind of lose it because they're trying to explain it like they're mansplaining, right? They're like, I'm going to teach you how to do this. And this is step one and blah, 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 blah. Like nobody likes that shit. Nobody likes being told what to do. Nobody likes being directed down the path.
yeah.
So you have to kind of present the idea to them, let them kind of think about it. Maybe they stew about it, right? Maybe they're like,
Yeah.
this guy's sure. Yeah. And so what I also notice, and you probably notice this with your audience as well, is that certain people are always going to disagree with you. Like these certain individuals, no matter what, like you could tell them something that they agree with, and they're going to look for that one little punctuation mark or the one word or something to exploit or give you a very specific response back to your vague response, right? Like
Yeah.
you give them a vague statement, they give you really specific, like, well, that's not always true. It's something like this. Some guy could go buy a duck in a bread shop and take a car down it. And like, oh my gosh, like you're trying to be super specific to something that's super vague. But it's interesting because I'm fascinated with human psychology. I'm fascinated with
Right.
reactions, like people watching, right?
Yeah.
And so we start to see the patterns, and these people don't even have the awareness that they're always disagreeing with you until
Right.
you call them out. I'll call them out. You've seen this. I'll go,
Specifically. Yeah.
hey man, I just noticed every time you respond, you're always like disagreeing with me. I think you actually agree with 99% of the statement above, but you look for that one caveat to point out, like, why is that? What is that saying about you? And then they're like, damn, like, because I just gave them a gift of awareness.
Yeah.
Like we operate it from our subconscious. So some people are always going to negatively react to maybe not you, maybe they do it to everybody, but you gave them a gift of awareness that, damn, like maybe I should have just scrolled through this one. Maybe I should have just not entertained being a part of this one because now he knows like every time I respond, it's going to be like negative. And I'm okay calling those people out because I need that awareness. If I were to do that to people, I would want them to say that to me, like, "Hey, Tony, man, every time you respond to my stuff, like you're always arguing or complaining." And guys, Angie, you nice. We see a lot of shit we disagree with on the internet, but it doesn't mean we got to engage and be involved in it.
Yeah.
Just keep
No.
on scrolling.
Yeah. Not at all. I mean, that's the last thing I want to do is perpetuate that kind of stuff
Yeah,
in the world. There's too much of it already.
that's right.
Yeah. Wow. I like that. Yeah. I love watching the responses because people just get very upset over nothing. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, you can, if this is the thing that's upsetting you in life, well, you don't have problems. That's how
Oh,
I
it was
always look
funny.
at it. It's like, man, you don't really got much going on in your life, but this is really upsetting you that much.
You know, the Super Bowl or the NFL, it was an NFL post because Super Bowl was last night, but it
Yeah.
was an NFL post. And the phrase I remember writing was that I wasted 4 hours of my life each Sunday when I used to watch the NFL. Me, like it
Yeah.
wasn't like, hey, you guys are wasting 4 hours. I didn't say that. I said I.
Yeah.
But even though it was my perception and my opinion of my own time, like you said, a lot of people were butthurt about my opinion of my time. It was kind of funny. Like there was a reason I said I.
Yeah. Well, I think it caused them for introspection of like, is he saying that I'm wasting my time? Does that mean I'm a time waster because I
Exactly.
chose to watch football? Like
Exactly.
it was funny how it gets people and like you said, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe there's some awareness that's being created there. And if they're truly getting upset over something like that, maybe it's because deep down they feel like maybe they shouldn't be doing
We
that.
we all know that. I mean, anytime we feel a hint of defensiveness,
Yeah.
we know that there's a little bit of truth in there. And even when I loved the NFL and I made 4 hours a weekend, like committed to watching it, I knew I was sitting on that couch wasting time. Even in the moment, I'd like it could have been a damn good game. I could have been entertained, but I said, man, I could probably be doing more productive things. Like I knew this for 20 something years. Like nobody's surprised by that. But when someone mentions that or someone admits it for themselves, like now it's like the secret's out of the box and they're like, oh shit, I'm uncomfortable and I feel that way too, but let me get real defensive now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when we were first friends, you had made some post. No, I had posted like something about fantasy football, and you made some comment about like not having time for that. And I immediately got defensive. I'm like, look, I know it's so good. I barely spend any time on this. And I'm like, oh my God, why am I defending myself right here? I was like,
See,
play
my
fantasy
joke
football.
about
It's like,
fantasy
okay.
football, my joke about fantasy football is in corporate, that's big, right? Like the
Yeah.
cubicle farm fantasy football water cooler talk on Monday and Tuesday, right?
Oh yeah.
I do not know one, like, and I know hundreds of people that played fantasy football in corporate, all men. Not one of them even played football, even in high school. Like none of them. They never even played. Like I actually played in high school. And I'm not saying I was like a badass because I played high school football, but at least I had enough passion and love for the game to get into it. Right.
Yeah.
And so these guys that geek out on teams that are not even in their hometown or geeking out on players. And I get it. I can see the addiction to that because that's like NASCAR. It's not about the cars, it's about the characters. Right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was just weird. It's like, why don't more people that actually played football play this? Maybe because they realize that playing it is actually more fun than playing fantasy version of it.
Well, fantasy's a little safer. Actually
I don't
getting
want
out there,
safe,
putting your
Angie. I
body
don't
on
want.
the line.
I want violent. I don't want safe.
I love that. Do you do other exercise besides just lifting? Do you do other things?
I mean, my wife and I would do most of our trips. I mean, you've come on our trips. We like to do the hiking, and we don't spend enough time in the mountains. There's not much hike in Houston other than the sidewalks.
Oh yeah, it's
But
pretty
we
flat out
do
there,
enjoy the
right?
outdoors and hiking and things like that. Earlier in my life, I did martial arts. I did judo for a few years, and I enjoyed that. I did wrestling, and so always like the physical and the combat sports. And you can't see my walls here, but I actually bought some 1980s retro skateboards that I hung on the wall. They were actually from my childhood, and I
Wow.
used to be a skater, a BMX racer, a freestyler, so all the half pipe. So I'm literally covered in scars head to toe, and broken bones. And I was always like the daredevil kid. I was always just willing to go do crazy shit.
Fun. And so you've obviously toned that down now. Now you just stick
Yeah,
to
well, I mean, it kind of evolved into racing over 200 miles per hour and doing that kind of stuff for a lot of years too.
Yeah. Are you still doing that?
I still enjoyed the road coursing. I don't do a lot of the drag racing and things like that anymore. The runways, I don't do those kind of things anymore. But I do enjoy road course lapping because what I've discovered, it's more about personal development because I've always wanted to be a better driver. So when we have a lap timer on our dash and we're doing laps, and it shows you your lap times each time you pass through the starting point. So if you're going faster, you realize like, hey, I did things a little bit better. I took that curve a little bit, corner a little bit stronger. I got on the brakes a little later. I accelerated a little faster. So it's very similar to personal development, but in a car form where it's like each lap, if I can get better, just each corner has like little things that smallest things can shave, hundredths or tenths of a second off your time. So each track that you go to is like a new challenge. It's like, oh, I get to try a new track and I get to try to do as best I can by the end of the day. So I think that's investing back in your skills and your awareness and your fear as well, like driving to the limit. A lot of people go buy a really expensive, fancy car that can do a lot of amazing things, but then they drive it super scared and they don't get any results out of it. So it's like, why did you buy such a car? You can't even drive it, So, it's kind of funny. They had a exotic car meet that came through Houston, and a couple of my friends were in that. It was like a cruising rally, like they go to different cities and they came through Houston. They went to the racetrack that I go to, and so one of them invited me out, and I was like, okay, cool. I'll just drive down in my truck in TRX Ram.
Mm.
And while we were there, everybody's looking at the truck, and it's a 700 horsepower Dodge Ram, and they said, hey, have you ever had it on the track? It's like, no. It's like, but I'll go out there with a session if you let me. And the guys organizing, yeah, cool, yeah, go out there. So I've got this video of me passing Lamborghinis and new Supras and Ferraris and shit in my Dodge Ram. Like I'm literally just out driving them. They have all the hardware.
Yeah.
They have all the horsepower, all the power to weight. They could definitely smoke me if they knew how to drive. But here I am in this Dodge Ram because I know how to drive. And especially on that track, like I'm passing Lamborghinis and all these exotic cars in a Dodge Ram. And people get back to the pits are like, oh my gosh, like what is done to that truck? And it's like, it's stock. Like nothing is done to this truck. It's the same way you could buy it from a dealership because then in their mind, they think if I go buy the fastest car or the one with the most horsepower, I'm going to win this race. This is how it works, right? No, it's it's driver. It's a lot to do with driver.
Mostly has to do with
Yeah.
driver. Yeah, I've only been in a race car once, and they have this one in Vegas where you can have they have a track and you can have the guy, he's a professional driver. He sits next to you and tells you what to do, and then you drive. And it was the scariest, most exhilarating thing for me,
Oh,
because
yeah.
he's like, go as fast as you can towards that corner. I'm like, but it's a corner. And he's like, go faster. I'm like, oh my God, but it's a corner. I gotta, take off and let up and start turning. He's like, nope, don't even turn until I tell you. And it was the most counterintuitive thing in the universe, going as fast as I could towards this
It's
corner
crazy.
and
It is
not
crazy.
braking. Like, wow,
Brake
that
as
was
late
amazing.
as you can and as hard as you can. It like puts you into the seatbelt every time. And
Yeah.
if you haven't had that training, most people don't realize that. The way we road course race is completely different than driving around on the freeway.
Oh yeah. It was wild. I couldn't even believe it. And then once I did it, I was like, oh, okay, I could
Yeah.
definitely get into this. But
Yeah.
I even enjoyed, and so then we switched up, and then I'm a passenger and he's the driver. And I almost enjoyed that more because, well, less responsibility. I wasn't worried about crashing and dying, and just like the thrill of going as fast as you can at that corner and seeing how he was able to maneuver around it.
Yep.
It's pretty amazing. Like the
It
adrenaline
is.
from that, I would say it's probably the most adrenaline filled thing I've ever done in my
For
life.
sure. Because that's the thing is also like when I used to do drag racing, you get a little bit of adrenaline on the launch and then you got 9 seconds of racing. So you got a 9 second adrenaline race, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're out there on a road course and you're doing a 20 to 30-minute session, you literally have a adrenaline rush for 30 minutes. Like that's a very long time. That's far longer than skydiving and any other thing you can think of. Like that's a long run.
It is. And so when you go do that, do they have other people out on the track as well? Like you were saying, the other
Yeah.
cars. So that would be my bigger concern, is their lacking of skills endangering me when I'm going fast. Does that not worry you?
Oh yeah, it definitely does. You'll say some of the people that don't have a lot of experience. We say they drive in their mirrors, especially if they see a big orange truck coming up behind them. So they're not looking ahead. Like, there's a metaphor with business and success. We're always looking beyond the curve to see where we want to end up, right?
Yeah.
They're looking at the mirrors. They're like, oh shit, look at this big thing coming at me. And now the ego kicks in, like, well, I've got a Ferrari. I'm going to teach this Dodge Ram what I can do. And they don't know how to do it. They're not very skillful at it. So
Yeah.
the whole time they're blowing the curves. They're not making the turns right. They're braking too early. They're looking in the mirrors. That's what we see driving the mirrors. And sometimes they'll just drive off the track. They'll just like go off into the grass with their fancy cars because
Yeah.
their ego is so big that they won't let someone in a slower car, even if it wasn't a truck. Let's say a Mustang or a Camaro was behind them. Oh, you're not passing me in my Dodge Viper and my Camaro. Like, no way, that's not going to happen. So they go off the track. They're not looking ahead. Where a true racer, someone that's been trained, we don't give a shit about who's behind us.
Right.
We're looking at who's the next car I'm going to catch. We're looking far, like several turns ahead, and navigating the corners the right way so we get the car in the right position. So yeah, it's a. I'm not so worried about the people behind me because they're usually slower than you are because you're ahead
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
But the ones in front of you, you have to watch. You have to be a little bit defensive, especially when you see them driving in the mirrors. And it's pretty obvious because they're like blowing the corners. They're not doing things proper. Their car's going out of control. So you realize like, okay, I'm going to back off a little bit and let this guy kind of get his head right because he could crash in front of me. I could hit him.
Right. Well, and you guys are going at such high speeds, like even with quick reaction time, you could, if they did something super stupid, you're going to run
Yeah.
right into them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the one thing that would worry me about that is other people, even just like on the roads out here. Like I am very confident with my own driving. It's the other people I don't trust.
That's right. And when we do the more organized events, there's different classes as well. So you got the rookie ones that have zero experience, and then you got the intermediates and the advanced. And so they tend to group the drivers based on level, not based on car. So a lot of people kind of think, like you said, they go buy the most expensive car and they think they're going to be an advanced level because they've got a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. And like, they're like, how many times have you been on track? Oh, once. Like, okay, you're in the beginner level. And they're like, but I've got that car. I've got that expensive car. I got like, it doesn't matter because the dude in the Miata is going to do laps around you in the advanced class because he knows how to drive his car. You don't. So
Right.
yeah.
And such good analogies for life. I mean, like you said, there's so much, even just in race car driving, that is synonymous with business and people and mindset and coaching. Do you make your people that you coach go out on the track and test them out to see what kind of person they are?
Well, the event before the one that you attended in Mexico, we actually rented out a racing school in Arizona.
Yeah, I saw
And
that.
so
I'd
everybody
love to
that
miss it.
attended the event, we actually went out there and did a full day of high performance driving racing school. And that was a blast. Like 40 of us out there, you know, doing laps and autocross and cones and slalom and vehicle control. And, there's probably half the people that were kind of scared about that. A lot of people are just very uncomfortable doing that kind of stuff. And,
Yeah.
they were intimidated by it. But by the end of the day, every single person loved it. They're like, holy crap. And even one attendee had to do one of those maneuvers like the next week at home. Like there was a freeway where someone slammed on the brakes, and she was able to think about what she learned in that driving school, like taking the open lane and not slamming on the brakes and running into the person in front of her. It's like it just kind of reaction. She's like, someone slamming on the brakes in front of me. Like most people would just kind of hit the brakes and slam into them, but she like said open lane, boom, and accelerated around them. So like it's cool that people take some life lessons with them.
Yeah, I love that. I know I was super bummed to miss that one. I was like, dang it. I think back then I was still doing payroll on Thursday and I couldn't miss it. But I finally turned that over because of things like that. I'm like,
Well,
okay,
good
I
for
think
you
I'm,
for firing yourself. That's
yeah,
that's how we should have.
after 29 years, I finally
Yeah.
let go of
There you go.
payroll. So, yes, it was because of things like that, and just the awareness of how are you ever going to elevate if you're keeping yourself stuck in the weeds. So yeah, those of us that are high producers, I think we have bit of control issues as well. So that's pretty normal. So why don't you let our listeners know how they can find you? Because I'm in your group, 365 Driven, which is an awesome entrepreneur group. So that's just like one of the things that you're doing, right?
Yeah, I've got a couple different groups, but coaching wise, I've got mastermind groups of 6 to 8 people each, and I do the one-on-one private coaching for people at that level. And best way to find me is if you're listening to podcasts, come find my show. I always do like the free content. I mean, I have a show that's been out a little over 4 years now. It's a top 1% show called 365 Driven, and I've interviewed, I guess, 290 guests so far. So, a good show. And yeah, the book Side Hustle Millionaire to teach people really how to take their ideas for their business. And it's really a 0 to 7 figure type mindset, and kind of a roadmap. Like, here's your ideas. Here's how to assess your business ideas against each other to figure out which ones are wasting your time, which ones you should walk away from, which ones give you the best odds of success. Kind of handholds people through the entire process: LLC versus S corp, funding, marketing, branding, website. Because I really wanted to make like this easy toolkit for people to consume that kind of gets them into the mindset of, hey, how do I start a business? Like, how do I do this? Because there's so many questions that people have, but they're just, the sources are all over the place for the different answers. So I was like, I'll just make this simple book, and it's done really well. It had a #1 bestseller on Amazon in 2018, and then the audio also hit #1 in Amazon the year after when I released that. So thousands of copies sold. I'm really happy with how that book came out.
That's awesome. What would you say is the number one reason why people won't start? Like they hold themselves back?
I think it goes back to the fear and the overwhelm, because if we look at all the things that we need to do to start a business, it's a lot of tasks, a lot of actions, and nobody knows where to start. So they're kind of just like, that's a lot of stuff. And it is a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But it kind of goes back to the weight thing. Like they go, but if I know I'm going to put in 6 months to get back to zero, it seems like I don't want to even start. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But literally, okay, nowadays with the internet and be able to register things online, you could have an LLC, a business, within a week. You can go to your state, you can apply for an EIN number, you can get your LLC started through those processes, get that going, get a business checking account online. You can create a line, you can go create the domain name for your website on one of the registrars that get your website. So you can actually create your Stripe account, your PayPal account, however you want to get paid. So by within 1 week, you could have an LLC, a checking account, a way to get paid, and a website domain, right? And that's 4 easy steps that can be done in a week. Most people will never do in their entire lives. It's just when you start to think about all the other stuff and thinking, and there's a lot of people even on our groups, the people that we love in our groups,
Yeah.
they just consume too much material. They go to every conference, they listen to every podcast, they read every book, and they don't do anything with the information. And that drives me nuts, because I always think about action, belief, consistency, ABC. You got to do the action first. There's they're studying and doing all this stuff because they need the belief. Like they're skipping the action. They're, well, if I go to do some more networking, or if I get on the Zoom calls with these people, I can, network with them. And so they feel like they're doing something, but that's not any result. Because at the end of the day, yeah, you had a call with a few people. Yeah, you went to a conference. Yeah, you did that. But what was it for? Like, did you do anything for your business? Right? Did you move the needle? And answer is that mostly is no. So I always think about getting the belief comes from the action.
Mm,
So you do the action, you go create that LLC. You're like, cool, I feel better about that. It's actually kind of cool. I actually own a company now, right?
yeah.
Go create the processor, the PayPal, the Stripe account. Like, cool. And I created something that I can get paid now. Like I just send people a link or an invoice and they can pay me. Like, cool, that's awesome. Bank account. Like all these little things are really simple, but those little simple steps add up over time. And within a month or so, you'll have an operating business that you can do, especially nowadays with online businesses. And you could just sell things out of your house if you wanted to, just to practice on eBay and things like that. So, just I think it's the overwhelm, it's the confusion, and there's a lot of people out there just not really selling the right information. They're just kind of misleading people or getting people involved in things that they probably shouldn't be involved in, and it's a mess out there.
Sure. Well, and I think we saw a big surge with that with the pandemic. All of a sudden, everybody's a coach. Everyone's, got masterminds. There's like
Mhm.
all, that was a lot of people's pivots is to start that stuff. But then they're branding themselves as authorities, and people are listening, and they don't actually have successful businesses or history
Right.
themselves.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely different levels of coaching. To me, if you're trying to hire somebody as your coach, they better have at least done what you want to achieve or have demonstrated results, repeatable results from the clients that they worked with, right? So, there's a lot of times people out there, like you said, they have the intentions, they want to help people, but they don't have the authority, they don't have the experience, they don't have the wisdom. And another thing about business coaching is like there's a lot of young ones out there too, right? Like
Yeah.
think about this. If you're hiring somebody that's in their 20s or early 30s as your business coach, they may be successful right now, but they haven't even gone through a downturn. They haven't survived adversity through business. And so to give you an idea, the last major downturn we had was 2007, 2009. That's 14, 15 years ago. So if they haven't even been in business more than 15 years, they haven't survived a downturn. So do you really think you should be taking all the advice from them? Because it's pretty easy to coach when everything's home runs and grand slams. Like when everything's in the upswing, pretty easy to get results. But what do you do when it goes backwards?
Yeah. Which is unfortunately probably what we're going to experience over the next couple of years. So, yeah,
Yeah.
really good advice. Okay, last question. If you were to give your younger self one really good piece of advice that you live by today, what would you have told yourself?
That one's pretty easy. I wish I would have done public speaking, like Toastmasters, something like that at age 18 instead of in my 40s.
Yeah.
And this may resonate with some of the audience here because even as a leader and successful in business and managing, 70 something people, even on my own team when I had my own companies, I guess it was ego, and it was also like, hey, I could do slideshow presentations, and I was always a good salesperson. So I was always, I worked in restaurants. I was a waiter, like managed restaurants. So I was always comfortable speaking to people, but I didn't understand the speaking with influence part. Like communicating with somebody is not the same as speaking with influence or speaking, it's actually manipulation or influence. It's the same skill set. Just what's the intention? Again, it goes back to that, right?
Mm,
And so I didn't understand that public speaking had all these tactical things involved in it. I just thought, hey, I can give slideshows. I've done hundreds of those, and I'm a public speaker, but it's not like there's a difference between being a presenter, a teacher, and a public speaker. And until you get the skills of actually being an entertainer, a public speaker, someone that can storytell, someone that can actually extract emotions from what they're saying, then you haven't had that training, right? So
right.
it's a level of awareness I wish I would have had early on because I think that not only will help you on your social level, not it'll only help, it'll also help in your corporate level, your leadership level, like learning how to speak with influence and emotional will actually help your entire career. And then if you need some, evidence of that, like go look at the data. You could go Google search this. Like if you look at CEOs of major companies, like all the publicly traded companies, and you ask, hey, what is the percentage of CEOs that have high EQ, which is your emotional quotient, or IQ, your intelligence quotient? So is it high emotional or high intelligence? I think the number was 65% of the CEOs of the biggest companies actually ranked higher with emotional quotient, EQ.
Mm.
So that's learning how to speak with influence, learning how to manage people versus just being highly intelligent and having all the credentials, right? And that's why you think about this. There's a lot of people out there have high levels of intelligence. They've got all the acronyms after their name. They've got the master's, the PhD, this and that, but they're like boring and they're never leaders. Like they're usually in some kind of technician level operator type role, but they're never like the leader, the CEO. And it's like, why is that? Because they haven't learned how to manage people. And so if you can go enhance those skills early on, you don't think that's going to help you get better dates when you're single? You don't think like there's a lot of possibilities that you can have by just becoming a better, more effective, emotionally aware human. So I wish I would have done that early in my life.
Yeah, and leader, like you said.
Mhm.
I think that nails it. I mean, for me, yeah, I've never been like the smartest. I'm pretty smart, but it's more of the emotional thing and connecting with people and seeing how that relates. So okay, all right. So one more question, because I'm very curious, and you and I have talked about speaking. Do you think it's important to have a practiced speech that is your story that you say over and over again as you're speaking? Or you kind of mix it up, you get a feel, or maybe what do you do? A feel for the room and sort of speak from the heart on something different where it's maybe not as practiced and it could go bad, but
Yeah.
usually it can go okay. What are your two thoughts on
I
that?
think there's a progression there. I think that depending where you're at on your skill level, both of those will be the right answer. Okay. So I would
Mm.
say that early on, rehearsed speeches, typed out speeches. That's the norm because we're more interested in you getting repetitions and learning how to speak with the inflection and add the storytelling and all those kind of things. And there's a structure. Like we think about the hero's journey. Like you state the problem, you kind of show the antagonist and the protagonist, and like, hey, here's the adversity you have to go through, and then here's what they learn to join, and then they hit the rock bottom. That's the emotional like energy, and then at the end of each speech, you always want to end it on an upswing. Like you want to leave people feeling like charged up and emotionally inspired. So there's like the structure that's very common. That's in movies and TV shows and things like that as well. So don't fight that. It works. It's psychological, right?
Yeah.
But you don't learn that kind of stuff till later on. But you start to realize like, hey, I just need to get better at speaking and using the words that I typed, and how do I put some more vocal inflection to them? Because if I didn't have the public speaking training, I'd be a very boring interviewer. And I would sound like the old version of me, which is monotony. That's the old version of me.
Yeah.
I would just be like, hey, Angie, that's really cool. And, and then I did this. And then, hey, I started this company. And then it's like monotone, one cadence, one pitch, no range,
Yeah.
no stories. It's just how normal people talk, especially dude speak. I call it dude speak, right? That's how dudes talk.
Yeah.
One volume,
Yeah.
one pitch, one cadence,
Right.
monotone. And you don't have that awareness until you go through training. They're like, man, say something a little louder this time. Again, accentuate that word. Like there's a lot of things that we learn by raising our awareness. And so as we progress as a speaker, then you start to be able to understand that you have a lot of stories by then, like because of the
Yeah.
things that you typed and all the things that you have. And I know that, hey, I've got a story that applies to this topic that's a 5 minute segment, and then I've got a 10 minute segment, and then they're like building blocks almost. So if somebody goes, hey, you've got 45 minutes to present on this topic, I can quickly now look at my 20 stories that I've done hundreds of times and go, okay, I can put that one on top of this one. That one segues into this, and like, boom, and there's a 45-minute speech. It's like Legos, right? Stacking. And so at the end, you only have to remember a keyword. Like if I have a story about crash, like crashing my car, all I have to remember is crash because I know the story. I've already done it 100 times. So maybe I challenge myself to give it a little bit better version of that. Right. So you read the room, you see someone who gives a question. Even when you ask me a question, I'm always thinking about what's the story that goes with that? How can I share that as an example? See,
Mm.
so we start to create this portfolio of stories by just creating those early on, like you said, writing them and putting them down and getting the reps, getting better at teaching them, telling those things. And so, yeah, later on, you'll just be able to not prepare any speech, just know the time limit and go, boom, go out there and just crush it.
I love that. The other thing that you're really good at, and I've been practicing since you and I talked, is that calculated pause. Because for myself, I'm always trying to hurry through everything because I don't want to waste people's time. But there's so much power in the pause, and you're
Is
really good at that.
Yeah,
in
the
your
pause is
speeches.
everything. It replaces the ums, right? That's
And it
that's what we
sounds a lot
learn. That's the
better.
first thing we learn in Toastmasters is the filler words. You can't say and and you know
Like,
what I mean. All these filler words that people don't even have the awareness that they say, and they will literally count those things for you. If you go up there and you do your speech, they go, "Oh, Tony, you said 15 times, and you said 4 times," and like, oh shit. So the whole reason for them to do that is you need the awareness. Like again, it's we communicate a certain way, the way we're raised, the people we hang around with, and you mispronounce words. I was raised by a Japanese woman, so I still mispronounce words sometimes because I start speaking too fast and I sound like a Japanese woman sometimes. Like, oh shit, maybe I need to slow down and like pronounce it the proper way. I know how to. Like, why do I still pronounce certain things like that, right?
yeah,
And so yeah, it's awareness. That's what a coach does for your business. It's what a coach does for your speaking, your fitness. It's all about awareness. Like, what are we doing wrong? What can we improve on, right?
yeah. Do you still have coaches?
I do. I definitely do. And I also have peer group mentors that I've created mentorships where there's people that are in my peer group that we hold each other accountable.
Yeah, I think that's really important to know because I think a lot of people think because you're a coach, because you're a counselor, because you're this, you don't need that. But it's like you need it just as much as anybody else because they're
Yeah.
there to help you navigate and possibly see things that you're not able to see in yourself so that you're better for the people that you're helping.
I gained that awareness back in corporate when I was probably 15 years ago. I was riding up the elevator with the CEO of the company, and it was a multi-billion-dollar company. And I really didn't get the chance to talk to him very often, but I was in the elevator with him. I was like, "Hey, cool," and we were talking, and he mentioned something about his coach, and I said, "Oh, what kind of coach?" And he kind of talked about his executive performance coach, and then he goes, "I got 5 coaches," and I was like, "What?" Like, he had 5 coaches, and I was like, "Well, what are they for?" And he's like, "I got a nutrition coach, I've got a fitness coach, I've got a speaking coach, I've got my executive performance coach," and so he's like listing all these coaches. And that showed me like, man, the guy at the highest level, the biggest office, like he's still like getting coached by people. And we start to see that pattern. So I think after that, whenever I was meeting these people at these high levels, I would kind of generally ask them the same thing. And most people at CEO level of multi-billion dollar companies have more than one coach. They have several coaches.
Well, and it makes sense because not one person's going to be a specialist in every one of those areas, like you
Right.
just mentioned. And, you want someone specialized in each of those areas.
Yeah, that's one of the advice that, in the fitness game when people go, "Hey, what's your routine?" Or because they're always curious, but they're not going to do anything with the information. So I always tell people go hire the most expensive fitness coach that you can afford because then you'll show up and then you'll be committed. And I said, hire them no less than 90 days,
Yeah.
no less than 3 months. So go find someone that you can afford barely. You got to feel a little bit of pain financially there and go commit to doing it. Pay them 3 months. Just pay them for the 3 months in advance. You will not skip those meetings. You'll beat it every gym session and you will get the result. And then the beauty of that is it takes 90 days to build the habit.
Yep.
90 days. So you're going to be in pain. That first month's going to suck. I'll give you the precursor. It's going to suck. You're going to be in pain. You're going to be like, this guy's torturing me. I hate this person. But then month 2, you're starting to see results. You're getting stronger. And those pains kind of go away. And then your body kind of shifts and it goes, "Hey, how come we're not working out today? I'm kind of craving that weightlifting. Like, what are you doing? Like, let's go. Like your body starts to tell you, like, let's go do that, and
Yeah.
so go hire that a coach, and commit to doing 3 months minimum.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, that's what I had to do in the beginning. I actually had to have someone show up at my house because I was
Yeah.
so unmotivated. I had to pay them a lot of money and they had to show up at 6 a.m. knocking on my door. And I was like, oh, okay, now I'm going to get up because you're literally at my door and I paid for it.
That's
And
it. Even
then
some of those fitness people, they have multiple coaches themselves. Like the people that compete, like when the gym I go to, there's a lot of competitors and physique. They have like a posing coach, they've got strength training coach, they got a nutrition coach, and that's just for their workouts,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, there is no limit to how many coaches you can have.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I could have more. I will someday. I'll have more for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on my show. You are just a wealth of information and just really cool to talk to. I appreciate our conversations and I appreciate you a lot as well.
Well, likewise, and I appreciate hanging out with you and your son and getting to know you guys. And thank you for the opportunity to be on the show. I think that you always enjoy these conversations with you.
Awesome. Cool. And what's the easiest way for our listeners to get a hold of you?
Go to my website, 365driven.com. So 365driven.com. Easy. You'll find everything I do there.
Awesome. And you're very responsive on social media and everything like that. So yeah, I definitely encourage people to reach out and just talk to you. Thank you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. Let me, well, if you end that, will that end that, April?
I think this whole thing,
Are you sure?
whatever happened, just talk. I don't want to.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think when we end, it ends, but yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Let me know when it comes out. I'll be happy to share it. And I look
Will
forward
do.
to listening to it again.
Okay,
That's
cool.
the other thing about podcasting is I'll actually listen to all my episodes.
You do?
I do. It's
Wow.
it's like reviewing game film, right? And it's funny because I was listening to Lewis Howes, which is one of my earlier podcast mentors. I'm still in his group, and he was interviewing Kobe Bryant,
Mm,
and he asked Kobe Bryant, like, "Hey man, how often do you watch your game films?" He's like, "Every one of them." He's like, "Even the ones you win?" He goes, "Yes, but especially the ones where I lose."
yeah.
He's like, "You've never missed one?" He goes, "Absolutely not. I watched every single game film, not like you see it on TV, but like in slow motion where I could have improved or like how someone blew a defense." So he's like, "That's intense." He's like, "Well, that's how you do what's how you do to be the best. Like you got to review how you can improve." And so
Mm,
I've listened to every 289 of my episodes because as a host, it's our mind is in a different place because we're trying to listen with intention to think about the question. How do we go this? How do we take this deeper? You're also thinking about the audience. Like, how do I ask the right questions to serve the audience? Right. So your mind's in a different place versus a consumer. So sometimes I'll go re-listen to my episodes and I don't remember asking those questions, but in the moment, yeah. But as a listener, it's like, oh, that was actually a good question. And that was a good answer. Like sometimes I don't hear the same interview. I would say most of the time I don't hear the same interview that I was a host of. It's weird.
wow. That's really cool. And it's oh, I struggle with it, man. I just hear myself and I'm like, oh, I
See that?
hate
And
it.
that's
I
that's
hate
a
hearing
mental
myself.
block. That's the whole like that was me too. I being from Texas, I used to sound a lot more Texas, a lot more country. I gained the awareness and I corrected things, but
Yeah, you have no accent.
yeah, I don't because if there's I was on a podcast. I was a co-host 10 years ago on this automotive one that a friend of mine was doing a car show and he's like, "Hey, come on here and be a co-host." And I did like 6 episodes. Man, I was super, super uncomfortable. I was
Yeah.
super uncomfortable because I didn't like the way I sounded, like all those things, right? And again, I didn't like being on the spotlight. But I think those episodes are still out there, like somewhere. And if you listen to them, I sound like Tony from Texas, and yeah, I was like, "Holy shit!" Like that's so funny,
Wow.
Yeah,
They'd be kind of fun to listen to now though, right? Like, cause you could hear
they're
what a difference
humorous.
you've
Yeah, and I
how
was
far you've
interviewed
come.
one time on a car TV show, like because I had my car at a car show and it did really well. And the host is interviewing me, and I sound country. I just sound Texas country, and it's not bad. I'm not the same person. I'm definitely not the same person.
But I think there is a perception. I know for myself when I hear real country people, and I know this is not true, but they don't sound as smart to me as
You're
somebody
right.
who doesn't have an accent. And I know that's like
It's a
judgmental,
social
but it's just
thing. It's a social stigma
perception.
thing. And think about this. Most people think British people sound intelligent, right?
Right.
Well, I worked in England for probably almost a year, and the janitors there still have the same English. They still have the same accent. So like, the lowest level poverty people still have the same accent. So are they more intelligent? No, it's just the way they speak. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of times my voice or my accent has changed because I had to work so many different countries. And also even in the offices, it was very multicultural. So when you hear different vocal inflections, you kind of just become the average of everything. Right. So
There you are.
Right.
It's true.
yeah, I'd love to have you on the show. I think we have a good conversation. So
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And I'll do my
I'll send you the link to schedule that when we get off here.
awesome. I appreciate that. Will you tell your wife I said hi? She's the best.
What was that?
Will you tell your wife I said hi?
Yeah, we'll do. Will
She's
do.
the best. You guys are such a sweet couple. I really loved hanging out with you guys, and inspiration for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, go have a good
someday maybe
day.
I'll like someone that much. Huh?
So go have a good day.
Will do. Thank you.
I'm gonna go to the gym and then take a nap.
Oh man, that sounds amazing. Okay. Have a good one. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.